So I want to give you in this video 3 top indicators that you may be struggling with codependency. But before I do that, I think it's important we talk about what exactly is codependency. If you've never heard that term before, it is a term that actually was coined to describe certain behavioral patterns that relatives and people in relationship with alcoholics experienced. The way they would behave around the alcoholic, things like that. That's where that term actually came from. So this term has now broadened to describe behavior in general, regardless of who you're in relationship with. Now, in affair recovery, I think it's pretty common that codependency happens. Codependency has some roots in fear. We fear things. We fear what other people think. We fear upsetting other people. We fear disappointing other people. We fear how other people are going to see us and perceive us. And that fear guides us to behave in certain ways. Codependency kind of lives in that tunnel, okay? So I want us to understand a little bit about what this term is. I encourage you to Google it and do your own research about it. One of the best books I ever read on codependency was a book called Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. I think that book is really phenomenal, and if I remember, I will put it down in the comments for you so that you can make sure you grab it as well if that's something you're interested in. There's also a workbook that goes along with it that was very helpful if it's still being published. But let's get back to the top 3. There are a number of things that filter into what we would call codependency, but I believe there's a big 3, okay? And I want to give these to you. So if you're experiencing any of these 3, you may want to ask yourself if this is something you might want to address, either with your therapist, with your coach. I'm a master certified coach. I work with all of my clients on codependency. If you're looking for a coach, I do give free consultations. You can check that out below. But codependency, the big 3, and I'll start with the number 1, and this is probably the one you might recognize the easiest. Do you find yourself struggling to say no when you know you need to say no? You are agreeing to things because it's important to you that that person is happy with you. Do you know what I'm saying? Is no something that you struggle to say? Okay, that can be a very important sign of codependency. Now, codependency, if you want to look at it this way, your actions are dependent upon other people, whether it be other people's perceptions of you, other people's opinions of you, other people's emotional responses to you, what they say to you, things like that. That's what codependency means. So if you're not saying no because you're choosing to go along with something because you're dependent upon how they feel about your response, and you know it's going to make them happy if you say yes when you really want to say no. That's number 1. I think that's a big one. I think many of us struggle with that. I think women struggle with saying no in general. So check that out. Take a step back and ask yourself, why am I not saying no when I need to say no? Okay. And in a minute, I'm going to give you some answers to how to solve this. The second one. Do you live in fear in a relationship? And in affair recovery, I think in a lot of ways we do. Do you live in fear in your relationship with your spouse, especially, that if things aren't good in the environment, the household, the relationship, things like that, that your spouse might get upset, and if they get upset, then they might end up back with the affair partner? Are you monitoring what you say and what you do because you're scared of their response? Okay? That kind of thing. Are you really keeping close things you might need to talk to your spouse about? That might be a hard conversation, but you're choosing not to do it out of fear of upsetting them, because if they're upset, they might contact the affair partner. Or if they're upset, they might get upset with you, and you can't stand that. You can't stand for them to be upset with you. You know what I'm saying? Are you actively monitoring the environment and things you say and do out of fear of how he or she will respond to you? That might be codependent. Okay? Fine. And let's go to number 3. And this was a big one for me. Does the mood of the person you're in relationship with, because this can be any relationship, but of course this is about affair recovery, so let's just talk about your spouse. Is your spouse's mood what determines how you feel? If they're happy about something, you're happy about something. If they're upset about something, then you get very upset about it. Are you deciding how to feel about something because your feelings are determined and dependent upon their feelings? Again, codependency. How's your emotional state? I'll give you a quick example of what that looked like with me. My husband is not a good patient. When he's sick, it's a hot mess. And every time he would become sick, he tends to get withdrawn. And when he's withdrawn and seems moody and quiet, that triggered me to no end. And when he was upset, I was upset. So I would start to become down and withdrawn, or I would go to him and start to overfunction. Are you okay? Are you mad at me? Are you sure you're not mad at me? Is everything okay? His mood drastically affected my mood. That's codependency. Okay? Those are the top 3, I believe, that are the biggies that you might want to investigate further, do some further reading on, talk to your therapist or your coach about it. Now, how do you pull yourself out of being codependent in any relationship? The number 1 best strategy is to create and enforce healthy boundaries. Now, if number 1, your lack of ability to say no, if you said yes to that was you, then boundaries are going to be a challenge for you, because a lot of times boundaries require you to say no to things, require you to really enforce boundaries. But they really can help, because if you have healthy boundaries, then you learn to live within your own boundaries, and you stop becoming dependent upon what is outside of your boundary to determine how you behave, how you think, how you speak, how you feel. That's up to you. That lives in your boundary. That's the healthy way to function in life, right? Those are the top 3, I believe. Boundaries are definitely the answer, but I do encourage you, if you feel like this is something you're struggling with right now, please get help. Do the reading on your own, talk to your counselor, get a coach. Do something to help yourself figure out how to get out of this, in my opinion, unhealthy cycle of codependency. And a lot of us betrayed spouses fall into this camp, okay? Don't beat yourself up or feel like something's wrong with you because you fell into this camp. This is completely and totally normal when we are living a life in fear. This is a fear-based coping mechanism. This is why family members of alcoholics ended up becoming codependent, based because they were scared to death. They were scared that their loved one was going to fall off the wagon. They were scared that their loved one was going to go on a drunken rage. They were scared that their loved one was going to turn to the bottle instead of talking to them about their problems, whatever it may be. It's fear. It's fear. Okay? So check those 3 things out. Rewatch this video, write those down, see if there's any truth in that in your own life, and get the help you need, please. Seriously. Codependency can be pulled out of. You can totally do this. You can get help on setting those boundaries. Could be okay. But definitely pay attention to see if you fall into that category.